All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Form Check Friday. We're going to take your videos, we're going to look at them, we're going to try to offer you some training advice. That's the crux of it all. If you want to submit, you want to be featured, go ahead and send in there's a link in the description box below. You can head to calgarybarbell.com and submit there. While you're there, check out the Calgary Barbell training app. We have just about 50 programs now, consistently growing library, which you have access to any new ones that get put in there. You may even have some input on what I make next. And you get access to our exclusive Discord community where we do these form checks every week for our members. Often, so Danny and I will alternate doing the Discord check-ins. And the last couple times I've done them, it's been about 2 hours of form checks, because everybody who submits in there gets real coaching, just like how we do here. It's, the app is something that I'm very, very proud of. I stand behind very strongly. So if you're looking to get to the next level, take your training to the next level, and maybe you don't want to or can't invest quite as much as it would cost for one-on-one coaching from a reputable coach, check out the Calgary Barbell app. That's my spiel. It supports us a lot, and that's what makes Form Check Friday possible. So anyways, from there, we're gonna dive on into our first lifter, Dylan.
Yep. I've been dying to speak. You just
I know, I'm
blah,
sorry.
blah, blah. It's such a long intro. Get to the point, man. Oh, okay, form checks. That's what people are here for.
They just want the form checks.
First off,
let's give them what they want.
We have Deep Hank. I don't think there's any other way to say that name. But what I do have to say about his name is that in this video, he got called on depth.
Oh,
and if
no.
you have deep in your name, like you got squat deep.
Okay, I think he did though.
Okay, can you play it one more time?
I think that's absolutely depth.
I'm the one who judges depth here. Yeah, that looks good to me.
Like that's definitely depth, I would say.
Is it a no lift? How can I fix this issue?
Well, this is a tough one, and this comes up sometimes in my coaching practice where, my lifters squat to what I would consider and what I think most would consider. Leave a comment down below. Let us know. Do you think this was depth? Did Deep Hank squat deep? Let us know. I'm interested in the consensus out there. I think that the referees calling this not depth were wrong. I think that was a mistake. So in terms of how you fix this, things get complicated, right? The first thing I would say is that you probably don't, because I think this is depth. Now, there are a couple of ways you can go at this where if you have a coach or handler, I would absolutely be heading over to the head judge and, protesting the lift and saying, what was that lift red lighted for? Do you agree? Or going to the jury, right? Do you agree?
I think head judge gave him a white light.
Head judge gave him a white light, okay.
Yeah.
Which, again, like this referee here is looking at it from essentially the same angle as us, but would have called it high, which I disagree with. I think you were absolutely deep enough. So, number one, make sure that you know your rights, basically, as a lifter. And you can protest these calls, especially if they're contested. Oh, there's Garrett. There's Garrett right there. This must have been at Centrals. Anyways, that's a good buddy of mine back there, wandering around, guy with a mustache. I don't think that this should have been called high, number one. Number two, unfortunately, these things do happen. We do end up sometimes with, I'm just gonna say bad calls, right? Calls that shouldn't have been made the way they were. And as a lifter, like I said, you have the right to approach the jury about it or have your coach approach the jury about it. You also have the responsibility to, if it isn't overturned, you gotta take your lumps. Sometimes you're gonna get calls that, are maybe not the right call. And sometimes they're gonna be in your favor and sometimes you get a gift. Other times it's gonna be against you. You're gonna feel like it's not the right call and it's gonna be, a lump. You take your lumps and you take your gifts. Now, if you do want to try and explore, maybe trying to squat a little bit deeper, and I think you might be able to without losing much, Because I think one of the things I'm seeing here on the descent is that we're very upright. We're very, very extended. And I think a lot of the times when we're extended, we end up in what's called anterior pelvic tilt, which is when your low back goes like this and your hips kind of point out that way. If you get into a more neutral position and your hips are a little more like this instead of like this, a lot of times you'll run into kind of like the bottom of hip flexion a little later. You'll be able to get a tiny bit deeper. So there might be some bracing changes you can make to squat very slightly deeper. And, you know, if these are the refs you're gonna consistently get, then, you know, I might try to explore that a little bit. Personally, no, I don't agree with the call, but, you know, I only have one angle. I'm not in the judge's chair, so my opinion doesn't really matter. But yeah, for what it's worth, those are my thoughts and how I would approach it.
Will introducing a squat shoe help?
It may, honestly, it might. It might make your depth look a little bit more convincing. A lot of times a squat shoe will allow for a little bit more forward knee travel, which in some cases actually is gonna mask your depth and make it look higher. But given you're already a pretty upright squatter, might allow you to kind of sit just a tiny bit deeper without it feeling deeper. So, you know, I would probably take, what is this, 180, right? So I would take some singles around like 140 to 160-ish, and I would do a back-to-back comparison from straight on side angle, where you can see your hip crease at the bottom, make sure the plate's not covering it, straight on side angle, camera at around hip height, and double check and see, okay, here's a set in flats, here's a set in heels, does it help? Because that's the only way you're gonna know for sure whether or not it makes your depth any more convincing.
Next up, we have McKay or Mike.
Mike A.
Still learning sumo. My back is naturally curved, so I can't get real upright. Just wanted your opinion on what could get me in a better position so my hips don't rise first.
All right. So I get your back is naturally curved, but I think your shoulder positioning could be better still. I also don't think you locked out rep 1. I think rep 1, you get like kind of close to lockout and then you just set it down. Right, like maybe we're there. The rest of the reps of the set were better. So I actually don't have a massive problem with how rounded out your upper back is. What I do think you could do a better job of is trying to get your shoulder blades from up here down a bit, right? I think you could pull your shoulder blades down into your lats and into your sides, into your back or front pockets better. Because I think the reason you're seeing your hips come up first is because you're getting pulled forward out of every rep, right? Because we're not set as tight as we could be with the upper back. Also, make sure that you're locking out. Especially if you're gonna have a pretty rounded upper back, make sure every single rep you are locking out, because a lot of the times, traditionally with people who deadlift with more of a rounded back, the lockout becomes more of an issue than anything else. So second rep was good. We got through it, we locked out. Third rep, we really got even more pulled out of position with the upper back. But again, I think we got through it and we locked out. But the amount that those shoulders are forward is pretty excessive. I would say you should work on trying to get your shoulder blades retracted the tiniest little bit and depressed actually quite a bit more. So just pulling the shoulder blade down into the back a lot more, I think, is something that you could do to get a bit better position and to ensure that as you're coming off the floor, you know, we're not getting pulled further forward out of position. And yeah, you know, especially somebody, like I said, with a rounded back, sell every lockout. Like pause it at lockout. Hit lockout, hold it for a second, then set it down. The last rep was a decent example there.
Well, this next name is Amir or Emre or Emer or
Emery? I would say Emery, probably.
One of those. Let's see. Squats are not doing well since I haven't been training legs until I started powerlifting.
Okay.
I can't keep the bar around my midfoot. When I go up, my butt goes up, then my chest goes up. It's not visible in this video, but I also have a butt wing problem, and I think that's what causes me a little bit of back pain during and after my squat sets. What should I improve?
All right, so Emery, there's a couple things here. Number one, I think we could find a bit of a better position for the bar on your back. Unfortunately, this rack has set heights. I would like for this bar to be just a tiny little bit lower down for you, so you don't have to unrack it from there, so you can get it a little tighter on your upper back before you pick it up. Probably, yeah, that's honestly probably the best place you can pick it from. But I think before you unrack, you can do a bit better job of just getting your upper back set and tight. Right now, it looks like your shoulders are really far forward, right? We're really protracted, and I think if you can pull those shoulder blades back and down a little bit, retract and depress a little bit, as well as get some tension, like pulling your elbows towards the middle of your belt, right? Pulling your elbows in towards the sides, or like some people like to cue, pulling the bar into your back, doing a behind the neck pull down almost. That's gonna be one way we can set a lot more tension in the upper back. And I think that's first and foremost gonna be important. Number two, these belts are not ideal for powerlifting. You can use it, it'll help, maybe kind of teach you the basics, but I would also use it a fair bit looser and ensure that when you're squatting, we're bracing properly by breathing out into the belt in all directions and pulling the ribs down, pulling the lats down, trying to just turn your trunk, your torso into a cinder block, right? Super tight. Now, once we're braced and we got the upper back set, now we need to learn to hinge. Because the first thing that you're doing, and this is a very common thing in people who are just kind of getting used to or learning how to squat, it's very common that we want to stay upright. We don't want to be pitched forward. So what we do is we just break at the knees, we shove the knees forward, and we try to stay really, really tall. However, what happens is you get to the bottom, and as you're coming up, because everything's so front loaded, we're towards the front of the foot, we hit the bottom, and because we're not tight in the upper back, that bar's pulling us forward. So when the bar pulls you forward like that out of the bottom, the hips, yes, are gonna shoot up a little bit, and we might get a little bit more work in the upper back, in the lower back, sorry. So once you get into a good position, let's learn how to hinge. So before you start the squat, I want you to find a good balance of heel and toe. Make sure that we're not too far forward on the toes. That looks to be what we're doing. And reach your butt back. Now don't lose your brace, right? Don't let this happen with your back, but just sit back a little on your heels, push your butt back out behind you so that we change the angle of our torso and start to hinge into the squat. Then once we've got the hips back a little bit, then we sit straight down. We also, as I see here, we're not getting depth quite. I think we're pretty close on a number of these reps, but again, we're also very far forward on the foot. And I think that's preventing you from getting depth. The further forward the knees go, the less convincing the depth is gonna look. So between getting a tighter brace, making sure that the upper back is tighter and the shelf that the bar is sitting on is tighter and stays tighter throughout the lift, and learning to sit back a little bit into the squat. As you sit back, you should feel a little bit of your hips and hamstrings. You should start to feel some tension back there. Once you do, that's a good sign that you can sit straight down. You'll get a nice, good, consistent squat, and you'll find a good position in the bottom. A great way to teach yourself that, or to learn in these kind of early days, is to do some pause squats. And do some pause squats like all the way down, right? I want you to just bottom out, find that bottom position without losing your brace. Find a position basically as deep as you can get, and drive up from there a few times with some weight, right? Have a secondary squat day, do some pause squats, make sure they're nice and deep. That's really gonna teach you what kind of position and foot pressure you have to drive up from that very bottom position. And that can be a really illuminating teaching tool. So what do we got next, Dylan?
Next up, we have Ricardo. I think there's only one way to say that name, but.
Yeah, that one's pretty straightforward.
I've been struggling. I don't know if it says on here.
In a suit. Yeah, he's definitely in a fusion in a suit. Anyways.
Ricardo says, I've been struggling with sumo lockout for the longest. This is probably the most weight I have lifted in a while. Second training block in a deadlift suit, and I feel like I'm still struggling at lockout. Okay. I have played with grip width, toe angle, and foot positioning, and I can't seem to find what the deal is. I'm currently training for collegiate nationals and would like any help or advice. So yeah, it must be equipped because it's equipped in the US.
Okay, so first off, I think number one, our belt is a little tight. And I think that combined with all of the extra tightness from the suit is gonna make it really hard for you to feel your pelvic position. You know, we've talked a few times in Form Check Fridays about this, you know, pelvic tilt, right? When I tell people they're overextended, right? We're in anterior pelvic tilt. What's happening here is we're in posterior pelvic tilt, meaning that the back is tipping sort of downwards. Anyways, we're in a decent little bit of flexion in the very lowest part of the back above the hips. I think this is happening for a few reasons. Number one, the tightness of the belt, the tightness of the suit. If there's any way you can get into a looser suit, that's gonna help a lot. That's gonna make things make way more sense. If not, let's loosen the belt a notch or two. We wanna allow a little bit more extension here. And when we have this pressure this way, if we're in any flexion at all, it's gonna be exaggerated. If we're in extension, it's gonna be exaggerated and maybe reinforced, right? The next thing I'm seeing here is we're very, very wide biased, right? The hips are super externally rotated, the feet are way out, and generally, I think we've found a really good spot in terms of center of gravity, right? I think shoulder line down through the rest of the pull is really, really good. You're not too far behind, you're not too far forward, so there's some really good things there. But this position here is killing your lockout. So what I would do is I would maybe toe in a little bit. I would definitely let knees in a bit more, because with the knees out so hard in that start position, it really does exaggerate this. So if you can let those knees come in just a little bit more, point a little bit more forward, that's gonna allow you to get a much more neutral position in your lower back. And that is, I think, probably the single biggest thing in terms of lockout. You can maybe look at trying to get a little bit more shoulder depression, a little bit more lats going on. I don't think we're too narrow. Grip width looks great. Another thing you can do is, you know, get some baby powder on those thighs in training. And as long as you can find somewhere to do it that your gym owner's not gonna cut you for, because baby powder on the gym sucks. But I also like this tattoo. I think it says "do one more." I like that. But yeah, a little bit of baby powder is just gonna help ease this transition a tiny bit. And you know, if you're training singles, that's probably specific enough that it's worth getting a little bit of baby powder on there. But yeah, overall, it's coming from here, and it's coming from the hip orientation. So I would try to address that first. Again, slightly looser belt, little less knees out, and try to like really find that extension. Try to find that extension and keep that extension as you're sitting into the bottom. You know, even the difference of a few degrees, right? So not necessarily going from like this to this, but going from like this, or going from this to this, you know, that can make a pretty huge difference in terms of how difficult that lockout is and how difficult that lockout gets. So those would be my considerations. And if all of those cues don't work and you know, being any more bringing that knee angle in makes it feel just like awful and sloppy, the other way to tackle this is, you know, hammer the top end, right? Deadlift against bands, deadlift against chains. Pause deadlifts is another good one, because if you're in this position, when you pause, you're gonna lose a little bit more and you're gonna have even more to make up at lockout. So, you know, if the technical side of things can't approach the issue, then look at it from a programming standpoint and say, okay, how can we hammer the top end so that, you know, if I'm gonna be in this position, I'm gonna be strong in this position. So those would be the ways I would address it, Ricardo, and I wish you the best of luck with it. because I think equip lifting is really cool and fun. So
Our final submission is Ryan.
Rion.
Or Rion.
Or Rion.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Let's see here. Ryan wants to know if he can get to a 405 squat with just form fixes. And biggest thing is he wants to improve bracing. So he has like more in his email if you need, but I feel like you might be able to see, and if not, we can go into the email.
Okay. So can you get to 405 with just technique fixes? Probably not. You probably need to get stronger. You're probably gonna have to put in work. Probably gonna have to slave away, get a bunch of reps in. Sorry, cut the part where I said slave. You're probably gonna have to work away, chip away, and make the progress. I don't think that in any situation I can say, oh yeah, just point your toes out a little more and here's 90 pounds on your squat. You actually have a pretty darn good looking squat. I think if anything with your bracing, we are maybe exaggerating how hard we're driving the chest up out of the bottom. Brace looks pretty good on the way down, but on the way up, it looks like we're really prioritizing, driving the chest up. Like it looks like we want to kind of set everything well here. Like this looks like a great place to start the squat, right? We got the head in line with the trunk. Everything looks like it's about to go into a great spot. And then you start watching yourself in the mirror. So my first piece of advice is take these hooks, put them over here, stop looking in the mirror. Don't do it. And if there's not a mirror there, well then look a little lower. That way we're not reaching the head up and neck back as we're coming out of the bottom. The next thing is to try to control that bottom position a little more. I think you can reach hips back just a tiny little bit more. We're definitely kind of rocking forward in the hole. I think we could have a little more heel pressure and use a little bit more posterior chain. Reach back into the hips and hamstrings a little bit into the bottom, because when you're forward and you have that kind of loosey-goosey bottom position where you're hitting it and maybe not staying as tight as possible, we see this sticking point, right? Especially when you're trying to extend up out of the bottom. So we got to learn to use the hinge, use the hips, and let yourself come up in that angled position as opposed to trying to drive chest up so hard. The next thing is these sleeves look like they're not really doing much for you, because this is your leg and like the sleeve is fitting you like a bell bottom here. And I would say either we have to get that sleeve like another 2 to 3 inches up, or we've just got to find another sleeve that's actually going to fit the knee joint, because I don't know if your knee joint being there, right? Like if the amount of sleeve you have is going to be enough to actually grab on and give you anything, right? I think getting maybe a slightly less stiff sleeve or a slightly, I don't know if I want to say larger, because if you're going to stick with Inzer and they're like, they're tube shaped, it's just going to be even bigger down here. But yeah, I would say you need to get these up higher and or get a sleeve that fits your leg better. I think that's going to help quite a bit. Especially with how much these new generation sleeves can do if used properly. And yeah, lastly, I would probably program some paused and pin squats as an accessory movement for you, because we have that tendency to kind of loosen up and try to use that stretch reflex and get that little bit of a bounce out of the bottom. And because it looks like the thing we're struggling with most is producing force from that bottom position, right? It looks like we're coming from sort of a compromised position in most of these reps. Rep 1, we have this really sort of pronounced sticking point, and it only gets more exaggerated through rep 3. And I think between the bracing, the positioning, sitting back a bit more, and doing some bottom end squat work, you can absolutely squat 405. Can you squat it from changing your technique alone? Almost definitely not. Can you squat it within 3-4 months if you work hard, make some subtle changes, brace harder, you know, get some sleeves that fit a little better or pull those up further. Yeah, I think so. I think so for sure. So yeah, beware of any sort of quick fix or shortcut that claims that you can, you know, put 60 pounds or 40 pounds or whatever on your squat just from one little trick. It very rarely works like that.
He was wondering if he should be going this deep, which depth to me looks.
I think we could go. We could probably be a little deeper.
Yeah, it looks
actually.
like it's on the line.
First
That
rep
one's
is in.
Some of them are like a bit on the line.
Second rep is a little high.
And I guess he was wondering about
Third rep
his
is on the line.
descent speed.
Yeah, so descent speed ties into what I'm saying about trying to control it a little bit more.
So go a bit slower. No?
I like the tempo of the first rep,
Yeah.
but I think when we're getting to the bottom, we're too relaxed.
Oh, okay.
Like I want you to resist the bottom position and or pull yourself into the bottom position more. Rep 2 and 3, I think we start getting a little looser and we start like dunking more and trying to just like relax into the bottom. But I also think because everything's really far forward, you're getting to like an end range of motion, but you're not actually finding depth, which is why I'm advising that we try to find some more like sit back, some more heel pressure, some more of that kind of stuff, a little bit more hingy kind of squat. Also, if you want to record for a really good look at depth, having your phone on the floor is going to make things look higher than they are. So this might be great depth, but to me this looks like on the line. However, if your camera was a little more in line with your hip, as opposed to being on the floor looking up, you're gonna get better representation of where depth is, and you're gonna be able to see better what it's gonna look like to a judge, right? Anytime you're recording depth or you're recording, you know, any sort of technical or like rule-based assessment, you're gonna wanna do it from the perspective that you're gonna be judged from. So, you know, bear that in mind when you're setting up your camera. Like, where's a judge gonna be or a ref gonna be watching this from? You know, set your camera up from that angle, from that approximate place. All right, that is our form check. We're gonna be back next week, and we're gonna work on getting some more guests here because I think people liked that, and we liked that. I had a lot of fun with Seth, and hopefully we can get Danny on the channel here and do some form checks with the wonderful one and only Danny. So if you're looking forward to that, make sure to hit subscribe, stick around for more good videos, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.